Everything started with the pregnancy of my fourth child. It was the perfect timing because it was right before Christmas Eve. And so we were going to get to be home with her siblings for the holidays and my mother, who also lived with us at the time. About bedtime, Steve went to put the kids to bed and start preparing for the next morning. Shortly thereafter, I felt just a horrible pain in my jaw. And it's hard to describe, but it felt like someone was drilling a hole into the side of my face. It was the most extreme pain I've ever felt in my life. And at that point, I knew this was very serious, and so I got down on the floor to crawl towards the phone and where Steve was, and to yell for help.
So I came out to check on her to see why she had yelled, and she was laying face down in our bedroom in a really weird position. I called 911. They came very quickly. The EMS techs came in here and were here for about an hour-ish, maybe 45 minutes, and during that time, she crashed 3 times.
Once I arrived to Seton, all of that is a bit of a blur for me. And then I woke up in a recovery room a few hours later. It was Christmas morning at that point. And I had the kindest nurses who immediately made me feel safe. And they told me, "You're okay. You're going to be okay." So as I was preparing to be fitted for the life vest, and they were starting to go through the discharge instructions with me, I suffered a second attack laying there in that hospital bed. And then very rapidly, I watched their faces change, and the monitors were ripped off, and I was being quickly moved and run down the hospital hallways with Steve running by my side.
And one of the doctors who had treated her, Dr. Stallman, I remember him like flat out running down the hall. And he stopped and he said, "You're lucky she was here."
And then that was it for me. I was asleep and did not wake up for about a month.
And that was surgery 1. She had 5 open heart surgeries in total, and 5 other surgeries. So she had 10 surgeries in January.
In the beginning, everything was failing, so I was on an ECMO machine. The ECMO machine is something that Seton has, and not all hospitals do. And they're the only one in our region that has one. And because I was taken to Seton, it was there when I needed it. And I've been told that if I had been at another hospital, there's a chance it could have been transferred to that hospital. But it generally takes, several minutes to get that to happen, and I did not have several minutes.
But also the fact that sort of equipment happened to be in that building, and that sort of staff happened to work in that building. And when he happened to be in a heart transplant center when this happened, she wasn't in a neighborhood hospital or anything. She was in the one building in Central Texas between Houston, San Antonio, and Dallas. There's one building in Central Texas that could have actually saved her, and we happened to be upstairs. It's the only reason she's still here.
The thing that I appreciate the most, though, is no one ever gave up on me.
But the hospital was incredibly compassionate because you'd have the baby schedule with nap and feeding and diapers and all the newborn stuff. And you really only had about a 2-hour window there between when she woke up and when she was going back to sleep because she's 3 weeks old or 2 weeks old. Because we have this 20-minute window here where the baby and mom are going to be together. We'd even coordinate Kristen's medicine so that she'd be a little bit more awake so that she could maybe respond to the baby and remember it.
The hardest part of this story is that on the night that I was moved to the rehab hospital, my sweet mother, who had been with me for all of this, who had cared for my children, who had been up at that hospital every day, every night, caring for me, she was home taking care of my children and had put everyone to bed and went to bed herself, and she suffered a massive heart attack, and she died that night. Her cause of death is very, very different than what had caused my heart problems. She had your pretty typical plaque buildup in the arteries, and it just was undiagnosed, and she didn't really have any symptoms. And whatever blockage she had just went from whatever percentage it was that night to 100%. It breaks my heart because she was in a cardiac facility with the top team in Austin right there every day. And it just demonstrates how much of a silent killer heart disease can be. There was nothing for them to see in her. She didn't exhibit any symptoms. She looked great. She was very vivacious and energetic and worked full time and was actually engaged to be married to her high school sweetheart. There is definitely a lack of aggressive seeking of treatment on the behalf of females quite often, and my family's no exception to that. So my sisters have written off symptoms over the years that now they aren't ignoring. They've been very aggressive since this all happened to me and to my mother about going and seeking out care, actually from the Seton Heart Institute.
The number one killer of women, of course, is heart disease, and very often the first sign of heart disease in women is sudden death. And so our hope is by having a center not only focused on treating women, but also on improving the knowledge within the community, within women and their families, we can save more lives. Only 22% of primary care physicians are comfortable treating heart disease in women, and only 42% of cardiologists are comfortable treating heart disease in women. It tells us that women are not being screened aggressively, and so we can't rely on all of our providers to make sure women are getting the treatment and screening that they need. We need to make sure that the marketing is in the community. Women have to be their own advocates. The vision for the Women's Heart Center is certainly improving the community awareness initially, but there is still a gap in our knowledge. We don't know enough about broken heart syndrome. We don't know enough about typical heart disease in women, whether certain medications work. So that knowledge gap will be important for us to contribute to. Research is going to be a very important part of our Women's Heart Center, contributing to that research, and then being part of the women's heart community. More and more around the country, you're seeing some of these centers pop up. Well, we collaborate with these centers. We're collaborating with Cedars-Sinai, with Mass General, to make sure that the knowledge is shared among the centers that do exist. So just staying abreast, staying current, making sure that women within our community are treated aggressively and appropriately is going to be our role moving forward.
And so we came home and we were committed to trying to qualify for a transplant at that point. Once I qualified, then the waiting process began. And on my birthday, I received a call and they said, "We have a heart for you."
And then when Kristen picked up the phone, because I had said, "Don't answer that. It's just going to be another one of these election people." And then because it was so late, she answered it, and it was Seton Heart saying, "We have a heart for you," which was the best call ever. And it was kind of awesome because we were walking back into a room where everybody knew her already, and so they were cheering for her. They're excited for her. And so the whole morning of transplant was actually this kind of like high five fest of all of this staff and people that had cared for her but didn't recognize her at all because she looked so great. And so when she came out of surgery, I was listening to her heart, which was awesome. And then when she woke up, I got to kind of hand it over to her and let her listen to her heart for the first time. And that was a good moment for us. That was December 3rd, and December 8th, we were walking out the door.
The Seton Cardiac Rehab Program, those people are angels. Dr. Cishek and Dr. Kessler and every nurse that cared for me, they loved me as if I were a member of their own family. They were honest with me always, but they always left the room with a piece of hope. And I just was marveling while I was there at the fact that this many amazing people could work in one building.
The rest of December, we just stayed home and did school in the living room. We celebrated Hattie's first birthday. So December 21st, she turned 1, and all of that madness was one crazy year that started with her being born on December 21st, heart attack, a zillion pieces of medical technology, 11 months of life support, transplant, and home, and then we had cake. I was wholly unprepared for this and had to rely on, Seton and the whole team there to teach us, not just heal us, but actually like teach us of what's happening and how to live with this and how to recover and move on with your life. Life is back to a sustainable normal. It is not the normal we had before. The way I look at it is, from that day forward, there were two paths. There's a path with her and a path without her. and we are on the path with her. And so they're all good days. Some of them are harder than others, but there aren't very many hard ones, and they're not nearly as hard as they were when we started this. So they're all good days. That's a really big deal for our kids too, to be celebrating Mom's heart anniversary.
My family and my friends were also excited that when I told them about this, they said, we're coming. And we sort of looked up and realized we have like 50 people that are going to be here that we now need to sort of plan some sort of celebration dinner or something with. And when I think about this group of people coming and getting all of these specific people in the same place at the same time, the only other time I can fathom all of these people being here would have been if they had been coming for my funeral. And they're not, right? They're coming for a celebration of life. And it would have never been possible if it weren't for all the things that people have done for me and for the amazing surgeries that I had and for my heart donor, clearly, and their family. And this great guy right here. So that's just awesome. That's the only word I have for it. It's just awesome.